Okay, I believe that we can start. Okay, dear participants, welcome to this workshop jointly organized by EUA and CRUI. On behalf of CRUI, I am happy to greet Stefan Bergman, EUA Director for Research Innovation, and Rita Morais, EUA Advisor for Research Innovation. I will give the floor to them very soon. As everyone knows, the EUA is involved in this European initiative facilitated by the European Commission to implement reforms to the current research evaluation system. And the research reform assessment agreement has been published on July 20, 2022. And the agreement contains principles, but also tasks and commitments, as well as the time frames, the time scale needed to reform and define for the coalition for an innovative research evaluation. I would like to point out that we have already moved the CRUI not only to jointly examine the document, but also to compare and evaluate the impact it could have. As well as we have created working groups that conducted independent analysis on the current Italian research evaluation systems. I am very happy to also welcome Professor Alessandra Celletti, Vice President of ANVUR, our agency. I am happy to welcome the magnificent rectors who wish to participate, and all rectors delegate. The wide participation is a demonstration of the great attention to this issue. So I give the words, I leave the floor to Stefan Bergman for his welcome wishes.
Thank you very much, Claudio.
Please, Stefan.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Hello, everyone, and thank you to all of you for participating. I see numbers still growing, 86 attendees. It's wonderful to see so many of you interested in COARA and in the reform for research assessment. I won't be very long, because I just want to say that we are really here as EUA. We're here for you, in the sense that, yes, EUA has signed the agreement, and yes, let's face it, Rita and I are completely biased because we've been working on this for the whole year, since January, and of course, we are completely convinced. But our role today is not to convince you to do anything. What we want to make sure is today to provide you with the information you need so that you can autonomously make a decision about signing or not the agreement and joining or not COARA, the coalition. So I very much look forward to participating in this workshop today, to answer your questions, to present to you with Rita what it is that this agreement and coalition are about. So again, thank you very much to CRUI, thank you to Claudio, and all of you for participating, and much looking forward then to the workshop now. Thank you.
Thank you, Stefan. So we can directly move to the war, and the first speech this afternoon is from Professor Menico Rizzi, which is a ANVUR governing board member. Menico will present through an introduction the research assessment reform in the national contest. Status and challenge. Please, Menico, the floor is for you now.
So thank you very much, Claudio, and good afternoon, good evening to everyone, depending on the time zone in Italy. And I'm really happy to try to present in 10 minutes. I will keep an eye on the time all the time, not to consume time for the discussion, which is the most important. What the agency is actually thinking about the entire process, as I am the representative of ANVOR in the coalition. And we decided to sign the agreement and to join the coalition. And you will see soon that there is a subtle difference between signing and joining the coalition on the 6th of October. And that was a result of quite a process that started in December 2001, where we had the first meeting with the European Commission, in particular with Dr. Kostas Glinos, that was the former head of Unit 4 on Open Science at the European Commission. And then the process continued by participating constantly in the 4 stakeholders assembly meetings that were held during 2021. So I'm saying this because I would like to say very briefly, as I said, why at the end the agency decided to sign and to join the coalition. So first of all, I mean, the general principle that will be presented were entirely agreeable from us. So that was the first point. We really thought that the general principle, they were absolutely agreeable. And second, the agency, of course, is strongly committed to guarantee independent, fair, rigorous evaluation, but also to constantly improve its procedures to the highest internationally recognized standards. And of course, being this coalition and becoming more and more an international discussion, not only European discussion, although it was, of course, the starting point, it was very, very important for us to, like, second element, to join the coalition and sign the agreement. And also I have to say, and I'm sure you will see today, that the way the process has been conducted and the fact that everything was very transparent, inclusive, and the first draft really changed along the process by incorporating, of course, in agreement with the general principle, advices and discussion, even from the agency, was really something that we appreciated a lot. So it was approval, that discussion is really, and all different point of view can be integrated in a single document. That was very pleasant. And so the agency actually, as everybody knows, plays quite a relevant role in research assessment in the national context. But I would like to say immediately, to make it clear, mainly to the EUA representative, that we don't have a direct involvement in any research career advancement evaluation or researcher recruitment. And we also don't have a direct involvement in assessing a research grant proposal. But what we do, and we think can be framed and improved thanks to the participation to the coalition, is indeed conducting every 4 years what is called an assessment of the research carried out by national research institutions, the so-called VQR. And we just concluded the third exercise, VQR3, that covered the period involved between 2015 and 2019. And I'm going by memory, basically. I decided to have, for the sake of time, to have not a formal presentation, but to present, very openly what we have done. So if I'm not wrong, we evaluated 134 universities, 14 research centers, and other institutions, 2022. And what I want to sum up here, as everybody knows, that as a whole, more than 180,000 research products were evaluated. I would like to stress the fact that when we define research product already in the VQR, we don't limit our attention to research articles. So in principle, all research product can be evaluated. Second, and I'm mentioning this because it will be framed within the presentation, I guess, by the European University Association colleagues. Second, we do not limit to English, but we have an approach which is multilinguistic, so any products in any language can be presented and subjected to evaluation. Third, for social sciences and humanities, we carried out an evaluation which is entirely based on peer review. And for the STEM disciplines and life sciences, we carried out in any case a peer review that was informed by bibliometric indexes, many of them, by the way. So in a way, you will see that many of these general principles, I would say, or procedures are somehow present in the agreement. So it was somehow an anticipation on what is going to be signed and what we actually signed with the agreement. And also this VQR involved an evaluation of the so-called third mission case studies in different fields. And also in that case, we used peer review. And again, it was based, for instance, on indicators provided by the university. I'm saying this because, as you will see, as you will hear, many of these concepts will be expressed and are part of the agreement. But the agency does not only carry out research on the VQR, but also in the context of periodic accreditation of universities. And this is done at the level of the university, and it's also done at the level of the department. And what we are going to evaluate, assess there, is the quality assurance procedures that the different universities and then the department put in place for research, for conducting research and for conducting third mission activities. And in that context, we'll evaluate and assess a number of aspects, but including in the new system that has been approved in September, general principle like attention to inequality aspects. That is one of the major concepts in the agreement. Activity on highlighting the relevance of research on teaching, which is another aspect which is also mentioned in the agreement. So again, even for this secondary because it comes second, not because it's secondary in importance, of course, activity the agency is carrying constantly out, there was some general principle that we found in the agreement. So all reasons, what we are doing in the context, in the national context so far, and what we are planning for the immediate future, somehow reflected the content of the agreement. And then so we are more and more happy to sign the agreement and to join the coalition. And the third concept, and the third not concept, it is a concept, but the first thing I would like to say, I'm keeping an eye constantly on the timing, is that one of the major activity we carry out is the PhD assessment. And in the new system of periodic accreditation, we also framed assessment and evaluation of PhD programs. And that includes, for instance, the guarantee that research freedom on all possible topics will be actually possible and guaranteed and sustained by the different PhD programs. And this is another main point that I would like to raise very much the attention of everybody here today and the coalition, the fact that any research reform, any reforming or research assessment must take into account the fact that the PhD students we are now forming, the young scientists, will have no harm in anything that will be changed, but on the contrary, will benefit of what we are doing. So everything has to be coherent and everything has to be developed, not by separating different aspects. And what is actually what we're trying to do by framing research assessment in the VQR, research assessment in the context of PhD accreditation, assessment on quality ensure procedures in the context of university and department periodic accreditation is happening. So I don't think it's now, I think it's 7 minutes. I still have 3 minutes, but I will stop in 1 or 2 maximum. So we stay. Claudio, if you're worried about this, I will absolutely stay in my 10 minutes. So I would like to say that the agency, of course, by signing the agreement, is expressing, in a way, its willingness, not only to prepare its own roadmap, which is, by the way, required by joining the coalition, with milestones and action to be taken and activities. And this will be done, of course, independently, as the agency is an independent body. But by doing this, of course, because the approach we always follow in the last couple of years is that one of general, called participatory evaluation. Of course, the dialogue and discussion with major stakeholders, collecting ideas and trying to frame with our own ideas, is going to be essential, as it has been essential in all the activities I just briefly described. And among the stakeholders, of course, the CRUI is very important, so I'm very happy to be here today. And this is even more important at the light of two facts. First of all, the coalition, the fact that there is a coalition forming, and the fact that this is an international discussion. So it goes beyond European member states. And second is because as agency, we are now in a very particularly happy and situation in which we have this all data coming for the VQR, and with Alessandra, we are analyzing all this. So we can really have new proposal based on data, based on what happened in the VQR number 3. So we are in a very, very important moment in which the forming coalition and our analysis on a very relevant and big exercise can put us in a position, collecting ideas, to propose possibly, hopefully, some improvement for the next exercise at least. And this, of course, and this is my final statement, very, very important for us and for the entire community to sort collaborate, of course, with respect to any one specific role, and to have a particular collaboration, of course, with the Ministry of Research. And this is very important, as I think it will be very important for the coalition in general to have a dialogue with the state member. So I think that the agency, of course, purely independently will be running its own proposal, but the constant discussion and coordination of activities between the coalition and the state member, between the agency and CRUI and the Ministry of Research will be essential if we really want to successfully implement general more principle, and not just to implement, but to really have them going on, implemented and carried out by the different institutions we have the privilege and the honor to try at our best to evaluate. I think this is actually 20 minutes after 4. I would stop here, and of course I'm happy to stay all the time and listen to the colleagues from the EU. And thank you again for the invitation. Thank you very much for everybody to listening. It's over. I finished. Claudia, thank you. If you're talking, your microphone is mute.
Sorry. Thank you, Professor Menicorizzi. You was perfectly in time. Now the floor is for Rita Morais, you are advisor for research innovation, and Stefan Bergmans. The speech is on the agreement on reforming research assessment, the coalition governance, and next step. What's in it for universities? Please, Stefan and Rita.
Thank you, Claudio. I hope you can see the presentation in the screen.
It's perfect.
Yes, okay, great. So in our presentation today, me and Stefan will basically have a very short introduction. Then we'll walk you through the content of the agreement, the coalition and its governance, and we'll also speak a little bit about what's in it for universities. So let's start with a general context. So there have been many previous initiatives that came before the agreement and the coalition on reforming research assessment. For example, DORA, the London Manifesto, or Hong Kong Principles. And these initiatives have been advocating for change for over a decade, but indeed progress has been slow. And research assessment has indeed focused to a large extent on publications, which has created many problems at system level, but also at individual level for researchers. So here we brought you just well, it's a picture from an article to illustrate exactly what also Professor Rizzi has talked about before. So the current system very much focuses on publication-based metrics, whereas there are a lot of other activities that researchers perform and that are part of their portfolio that are not included in many research assessment exercises. So the idea is really to broaden the spectrum of what is assessed and valued. At national level, there have been some countries that have already started this journey a while ago. For example, the Netherlands with the Initiative for Rooms for Everyone's Talents, or Norway with the NORCAM toolbox. And for example, EUA has also, together with DORA, collected case studies on different ways of doing academic research assessment. So this is just a little bit of context from what's happening on the ground. At policy level, there's also been an increased momentum for this initiative. Here you have several European level developments. So we would just highlight the new ERA and ERA Action 3 on reform of research assessment, and the Council conclusions on research assessment and implementation of open science, which were published in June 2022. So this all to say that there's also been a policy context that has been very favorable and that has given momentum to the initiative. We will go now to the content of the agreement, as we have a lot to cover, so apologies if I'm going too fast. So as Claudio said in the beginning, the agreement was published on the 20th of July, and the full text is available in the COARA website. To give you an idea about how the agreement was shaped and it came about to be, so there was a drafting team, which was composed of EUA, Science Europe, representing research funders, and facilitated by the European Commission, together with Dr. Karen Strobens on her individual capacity as a researcher on research. So the drafting team was responsible for drafting, well, the multiple versions of the agreement, which were then subject to input by two main groups: the core group, which was a group of about 20 research organizations across Europe, and the stakeholder assembly, which was a group of more than 350 organizations from 40 countries that had expressed interest to participate in the development of the agreement and the coalition. So based on the input provided, the agreement, there were many iterations of the document, naturally, and member states were also provided input and comments through the European Research Area Forum and the ERA Committee. And so this process took place between January and July, when the final agreement was published. So here you have the structure of the agreement. So first, the agreement outlines some high-level principles, which come from the scoping report that the Commission had published before. Then the agreement outlines the commitments, which are 10 commitments divided into 4 core commitments and 6 supporting commitments. And we will look into these more closely in the presentation. The agreement also outlines some high-level principles for the organization of the coalition. It sets a specific time frame, which we will also look at. And then there are some annexes, which are not an integral part of the agreement, but are provided as additional resources. So we'll go first to the introduction of the agreement. So here we transcribed some pieces from that introductory part in the agreement. So in the agreement, the signatories, they agree on the need for reforming research assessment. And the vision is that the assessment of research, researchers, and research organizations really recognize diverse outputs, practices, and activities that maximize the quality and the impact of research. The scope of the agreement, so it is focused on research performing organizations, including, of course, universities, research units, research projects, individual researchers, and research teams. It establishes a common direction for reform while respecting organizations' autonomy, and this is a very important point. So the signatories commit to implementing these reforms through a coalition of diverse stakeholders that is global in scope. So whereas the agreement was indeed developed mostly in Europe, it is open for organizations across the globe. And signatories well, they commit to work together to enable systemic reform on the basis of the common principles outlined in the agreement in a specified agreed time frame in order to exchange information and mutual learning. So here you have the four core commitments. So as I've said before, so the core commitments, they include 2 commitments to enable better recognition of the diverse practices and activities that maximize the quality of research, and 2 other commitments to enable a move away from the inappropriate uses of metrics. And here the agreement defines what is an inappropriate use of metrics, which means relying exclusively on author-based metrics, for example, counting papers, patents, citations, to assess quality and/or impact. It also includes assessing outputs based on metrics relating to publication venue, format, or language, and relying on any other metrics that do not properly capture quality and/or impact. So the 4 commitments, here you have the titles of the commitments. So in the agreement itself, each of the commitments is much more developed, and we invite you to go to the text. But because of time constraints, we cannot present the full text for each commitment. I will now read those 4 because, as you can imagine, each word has been really carefully chosen amongst all the ones involved. So the first commitment is about recognizing the diversity of contributions and careers in research in accordance with the needs and nature of the research. The second core commitment is about basing research assessment primarily on qualitative evaluation, for which peer review is central, but supported by responsible use of quantitative indicators. Then the third core commitment is about abandoning inappropriate uses in research assessment of journal or publication-based metrics, in particular, those uses of the journal impact factor and age index. And finally, avoiding the use of rankings of research organizations in research assessment. Then we have the remaining 6 supporting commitments. And here, the supporting commitments, we have 3 commitments to enable the move towards new research assessment criteria, tools, and processes. And then 3 other commitments to facilitate mutual learning, communicate progress, and ensure that new approaches are evidence-informed. So commitment 5 is about organizations committing resources to reforming research assessment. Commitment 6 is about reviewing and developing research assessment criteria, tools, and processes. And then this commitment is subdivided in criteria for units and institutions. So involving directly research organizations and researchers at all career stages, reviewing and developing criteria for assessing research units and research performing organizations while promoting interoperability. And criteria for projects and researchers. So again, with the involvement of researchers at all career stages, review and develop criteria, tools, and processes for the assessment of research projects, research teams, and researchers adapted to their context of application. Then commitment 7 is about raising awareness of research assessment reform and providing transparent communication, guidance, and training on the assessment criteria and processes. Then we have commitment 8 on exchanging practices and experiences to enable mutual learning within and beyond the coalition. Commitment 9 is about communicating progress made on adherence to the principles and the implementation of the commitments. And finally, the 10th commitment is about evaluating practices, criteria, and tools based on solid evidence and the state of the art in research on research, and making data openly available for evidence gathering and research. So the time frame that the agreement stipulates, it has basically 2 main milestones. The first is after the first year of signing the agreement. So for those organizations that sign this year, this will be the first milestone will be next year. And then the second milestone on year 5, so after 5 years of signing the agreement. And the idea is that signatories, they agree to share with each other and with their community how the organization has started the process of reviewing or developing criteria in line with the core commitments and according to an action plan that they will define with specific milestones then by the end of the first year of signing the agreement. And then signatories also agree to regularly demonstrate progress towards reviewing, developing, and evaluating criteria, tools, and processes that fulfill the core commitments, with this touch point at the end of year 5 of signing the agreement, by which time it is expected that organizations will have worked through at least one cycle of review and development of their assessment criteria, tools, and processes. So then after the timeline, the time frame, there are the annexes. As I've said before, they do not form an integral part of the agreement, but they are provided as additional resources for organizations. And these are available again in the COARA website. So there are 4 annexes. The first outlines the need for reform. The second one clarifies the terminology used. Annex 3 suggests a reform journey, and finally, the Annex 4 provides an initial toolbox, which will be updated as the coalition starts working. So some common questions we get is, okay, my organization wants to sign the agreement. What does it mean specifically in terms of what it is expected at the end of year 1 and year 5? So as we've said before, a key aspect of the agreement is the autonomy of institutions. So the concrete steps and activities to be developed by year 1 and by year 5, these are to be decided by each institution itself. So it is the responsibility of each signatory to develop its own path in implementing the agreement and the commitments. There will be no benchmarking with other institutions or no benchmarking across countries, for example. So the idea is that organizations will, in the framework of the coalition, they will commit to sharing information on the progress made and the lessons learned in the reform journey according to this specific time frame. But this sharing of information, this will take the form of a self-assessment exercise. So there will be no top-down evaluation on the progress of institutions when implementing the agreement. In relation to resource allocation, so we also get this question. So my organization wants to sign. Are there any required commitments in terms of resource allocation? And this is partly reflected in Commitment 5. So here we brought you a bit more in detail the text of Commitment 5. So the idea is that each institution, again, will be autonomous in deciding the type and the amount of resources, whether that is budget or staff capacity, that they will commit to implement the agreement. So there is no minimum requirement, and each institution will decide on the level of resources they wish to employ to implement the agreement. Is the agreement legally binding? It's another common question. So the agreement is not legally binding. It has more of a morally binding nature, if you will, towards the peer organizations and the community within the coalition. However, it is an agreement. It has clear commitments with a clear timeline. And also, signing the agreement is a precondition for joining the coalition. So only organizations that sign the agreement can join the coalition. Participation in the coalition is completely on a voluntary basis. And again, it is very important to emphasize the full autonomy of organizations that will retain full control on the steps that they will take to implement the agreement, and also the speed at which they will do so. Also important to mention that organizations can leave the coalition at any time if they so wish. So all of the information on the agreement, including the full version of the agreement, the annexes with the additional resource material, they are available in the COARA website, which includes as of now, all the information that is available on the agreement and the coalition. And for organizations that wish to sign, they can do so also through the website. So there is a form to be filled. Then there is a validation process that is done by the interim secretariat, which is again EUA, Science Europe, and the Commission until the 1st of December, when the coalition will officially start. And once the validation process is complete, then organizations are informed that their signature has been accepted, and then their logo is uploaded to the website. Just to mention, and Stefan will also mention that in his part of the presentation, that it may take still a few days between organizations signing and the logo to be displayed on the website because we have this validation process that takes place in the meantime. And now I will hand over to Stefan, who will tell you more about the importance of universities in the coalition and the coalition governance.
Thanks a lot, Rita. And yes, of course. Why are we here today, Rita and I? Well, it's because we think at the EUA that, of course, it is very important that universities are the ones actually bringing about the change. So we think that it is for universities to get involved in the coalition and in the reform of research assessment. That's why we are here to provide you the information we hope you need, actually, to know if you want to get involved in the process and make the decision about signing and about joining the coalition. We are really hoping that universities will be really well represented within the coalition, but of course within its governing bodies, because that's the way we think. That's the only way we think, actually, that it will guarantee that the university sector will be taken into account as we move into the reform. It is wonderful to hear, of course, that ANVUR, for example, has signed. But we want to make sure that universities also have a say and are, ready to enter this dialogue with ANVUR and other stakeholders out there. So that's to us very important. That's why we're here today. So where are we at? Well, the signing of the agreement was launched on the 28th of September at the RNI Days organized by the European Commission. So next slide, please. What we've been able to do, actually, is to reach from at that moment 51 signatories on the launching date. Now, a bit more than a month later, you can see we are already at 257 signatories. That's 257. As Rita mentioned, the number you will see on the COARA website are a bit lower than that because we are actually, we need to validate each signatory. That said, the numbers are growing really fast. I was presenting this last week to the Conference of Rector in Spain, and I was, at that point, the numbers were just reaching 200. So you can see that just over a few days, we've really went up really strongly. The good news, as you can see, is that 50% of those that have signed are universities or organizations that represent them. So that's a very good sign, but I personally think it's not enough. You can see that there's a good representation also of the other stakeholders that will be involved in the coalition. But today, 257. Next slide. How does that split up? Well, the biggest numbers, as you can see, is from organizations from Europe. So like the EUA, for example, we work pan-European wise. It's followed, as you can see, by France, the Netherlands, Spain, and you can see that Italy is right there with 10 signatories so far. So we do hope that after today, there will be more. You can see also in gray, right there, is that there are global actors, global signatories also, right above 10 right now. But you can see also from all the way to the bottom, for example, that we have one signatory from Brazil, another one from Tunisia, one from Turkey. So the aim here is to go much beyond, of course, and not to remain just in Europe, because as you know, research is global, and therefore we need also the reform of research assessment to be global. Next slide. How does that break up for universities themselves? Well, as I said, 50%. So we are at 116 universities so far. 6 national rectors conferences have signed. Just last Friday, it was CRUI, the conference of rector of universities in Spain, actually, that signed the agreement. And we also have 7 other university networks like EUA, for example, Jeroen, or Coimbra group, for example, have signed. And you can see here how that splits. Out of the 10 that have signed for Italy, there are 3 actually, or 4 that have signed that are universities. So there's plenty of room for your universities also to sign there, I have to say. Next slide. So since we've finished the agreement and published the agreement, the drafting team that Rita was presenting, in also working with the stakeholders actually in the stakeholder assembly, has been working on the coalition itself and its governance. And here, what I'd like to insist on is, of course, the fact that we've published everything. All the documents on the governance are available on the website. Next slide. What we have in there are the principles that we think should be guiding the conduct of the coalition, where it should go. I don't have the time to go into that, but you can see that, for example, openness is very important. Of course, the voluntary and community-driven aspect of the coalition is important, and the idea is really is to be as inclusive as possible and have trust actually within the coalition. So that's very important. Also, you see the last one is that we want to focus, and the members of the coalition should be non-profit. So really, we do not want to have commercial activities, players come into play here. But again, these are the principles. What I think is more important is what we're putting in place, what we're proposing to put in place as a government. Next slide. So on the 20th of October, we've published, 24th of October, we published the documents on the governance and the operation of the coalition. So now today on the COARA website, you have documents on the governance. So here we're talking about the guiding principles for the coalition itself, for its structures, for the powers, etc. You also have rules and procedures for the working groups. I'll be describing what the working groups are a little later. We also have the rules and procedures for the chair, vice chairs, and the steering board. So that is also available there. And finally, we have the code of conduct. And again, all that is on the COARA website. You can go and read it. We also published just a few weeks ago the call for candidacy for the steering board and also for chair and vice chair there. So that also is available. And I'm just letting you know that, of course, we're welcoming all of those who will want to volunteer for those positions. Next slide. What about the membership? Well, it is, of course, all the members will be those that sign the agreement. We haven't had the case so far. All those who have signed are the ones also who are the members. But of course, you can decide also to sign and not join the coalition. That said, I think this is the big difference between this agreement and this process and something like the DORA declaration, for example. DORA declaration is only a declaration. This initiative is about being, moving into implementation. Once you have signed, the idea is to get going and work together actually, and work together between the different members. So here we expect the stakeholders to be the ones who do the assessment or that are being assessed. So typically universities, for example, and their association, but also research center, research infrastructures, and you can see the many different members, stakeholder groups, if you want, that we see here. What we're going to make sure also is that membership is also well represented within the steering board. What's important is at this point, membership, Rita mentioned it, is approved by Science Europe and EUA. But afterwards, it will be approved by the steering board. And very important, once you become a member, you can also leave at any time if you think that is the way you want to proceed in your university. Next slide. What are the coalition bodies? How do we envision? Well, the most important one will be the General Assembly of the members. This is the gathering of all the members. This will be the highest level decision-making body within the coalition. And in this case, we expect that it will be meeting once a year. But the first year, many things will have to be put in place. So we expect that there will be at least 3 meetings of the assembly taking place in the first year. The first one will be the one on the 1st of December. That will be the constitutive assembly. Then we've got working groups. So the working groups I'm going to go in details about, but this is where the exchange of knowledge, the mutual learning exercise will take place. This is where the actual reform and how to do it will be discussed. And of course, participation will be purely on a voluntary basis. Then you've got a steering board. This is an elected body, elected by the members in the General Assembly. It will be a collegial body that will be responsible for the overall strategy, making sure that the direction that the coalition is taking is well in line with the agreement and the principles there, with the commitments that are also in the agreement. So it's about also the strategy, but also making sure, of course, that the business plan and sustainability of the coalition are ensured. And then finally, you'll have a coalition secretariat that will be responsible for the support in terms of administration, logistics, for example, the communication, etc., etc. So those are really the coalition bodies that are envisioned for COARA. Next slide. What will the General Assembly be responsible of? Well, as I said, it's the highest level decision-making body for the coalition. It will approve the governance and rules of procedure. It will happen on the first assembly on the 1st of December. But of course, there might be change coming in the future. So that's also something that could happen again. It will be electing the chair, vice chairs, and the steering board member. It will approve the annual work plan and the budget that will be put forward by the steering board. It will also be the ones appointing the coalition secretariat. That will take place actually on the 1st of December. It will also approve the strategy guiding the operations and activities of the coalition. It should approve the strategy for outreach, as I said, and as mentioned by Rita, but it has to be global. So here we need to have a strategy on how we're going to go about to go global. So that's also something that the General Assembly will be approving. And then finally, it will approve the procedures and criteria that govern the establishment of the working groups. So they won't decide of what the working groups are, but they will ensure that actually the procedures are put in place so that there's also good coordination between the different working group. So I will come back on this at the end with the timeline. But if you want to be part of the first constitutive assembly that will take place on the 1st of December, you will have to sign before 17th of November. That said, 17th of November will not be the final limit. The signing will be opened forever almost after. We expect that some cannot make it by the 17th, and some also will need more time, maybe to be convinced or to convince people within their universities to join the coalition. But if you want to be part of the Constitutive Assembly on the 1st of December, the deadline is just this week on the 17th of November. Next slide, please. I said earlier that I was going to talk about the working groups because the work of the coalition is going to take place through those working groups, really. If you want, they're going to be like communities of practices that will be the place where the exchanges with the sharing of experience, of challenges, of pilots, for example, would take place. That's where the real collaboration will take place. And there could be different types of working groups. There could be working groups around, specific interest. So ad hoc horizontal topics. For example, some have raised that they're could be a need for peer review to be a topic looked into by the working group. There could be also working groups around disciplines. There are well-known differences when it comes to reforming research assessment. When it comes to different disciplines, or there could be actually also working groups specifically on interdisciplinarity, for example. Then there could be working groups on specific institutions. Maybe we need to have a working group dedicated to universities in this case. And that, as mentioned by Rita earlier, we are right now at a time when member states and their governments are really supporting this initiative. And within the context of the new European research area, within ERA Action 3, they are expecting to come in dialogue with their own national stakeholders within the coalition. So that's a quite unique opportunity. So there will likely be working groups at the national level also in there. That said, working groups will not be the only way that the coalition will implement its work. There will be workshops, there will be conferences, for example, seminars, etc., that will also allow for further sharing and dissemination and mutual learning to take place. Next slide. We get very often a question about the funding. Well, I just want to reassure you right away, to be a member, you do not need to pay any fee. There will not be a fee. That's quite clear. What is expected actually is that there will be primarily a voluntary in-kind contribution. So for example, if you sign and you're part of the coalition, if you decide to contribute through one of your staff in your university to be part of a working group, that is typically voluntary in-kind contribution. That said, we do expect that there will be some funding coming, and this will come from research funding organizations mainly, but there could be also cash contribution from some other members. We know for a fact, for example, that the European Commission, who has signed the agreement, will be putting forward a wide-area call to support the coalition, for example. So that's one source of money that will come next year. All the options will be further detailed on the 1st of December at the Constitutive Assembly. And this is where actually the vote will also take place. So if you're a member, you will be able to vote on the funding models there. Next slide. I will finish then with the timeline, because of course we've made huge progress since July. When the agreement was published, and we're well beyond. As I said, on 20th of October, all the documents on the governance, the rules of procedure and code of conduct were published on the COARA website, as well as the call for candidacies for chairs, vice chairs, and steering board members. The next cutoff date is, of course, 17 November. That's the deadline for signature of the agreement to be part of the first Constitutive Assembly. Very important. You will be able to sign after. You will just not be part of the first assembly. You will be part of the coming ones. By 17 November will also be the deadline for nominations for candidacies for chairs, vice chairs, and steering board member. Something to keep in mind. After 17 November, EUA Science Europe and the Commission will process all those candidacies, will process the last signatures, and will be able to then come back to you on the 24th of November with the candidates for the steering board of COARA, as well as with the interim secretariat. And as I mentioned, 1st December, Constitutive Assembly. It will be online. Unfortunately, we cannot do this in person. That will come probably later. We will be chairing this as Science Europe and EUA will be the interim chairs. But of course, as a chair will be elected, that chair will be able then after to take over. So with that, I will stop here. Next slide. I will thank you very much for your attention. And then Rita and I are more than happy to answer as many questions as you might have. Thank you again.
Thank you, Rita and Stefan, for the very clear presentation, not only for to have show us politics, but also the governance structure you show, and also for the information about the next steps and the process for the to candidate to be part of COARA. Now I leave the floor to. I am sure really that your presentation will open the discussion, and the number of questions will comes from the participant.